Hey guys, and welcome back to Ayana's DIY Corner. Now in today's video we're going to continue from the last video where I showed you guys how to make squares using the double crochet method. Now I know in the last video I used different colored crochet thread, but after creating my squares and laying them out, I didn't like how the colors all looked together. It didn't work the way it worked in my mind. So I went ahead and used a blue solid color, and I still went ahead and got a nice gradient color, but I got it in the same color scheme. So I got a blue and white crochet thread to go along with it to mix and match. So in the first video, the squares were 20 chain links in length. This one is only 15 in length, but it's the same amount of rows going up, which is the 10 that I showed you guys in the last video. Now in today's video, I want to show you guys how to go ahead and attach your squares. Now for this, I'm just going to create a nice little pattern that I would be using for my creation. So after laying out my pattern, I can see my pattern now. The next step is to stitch all my pieces together and create one complete piece of patchwork out of it. So for this, we're going to start attaching our first two pieces in our pattern. So I'm just going to push this aside. I'm just going to shift my pattern aside. And we're going to start working with attaching. Now the reason for facing our crochet squares right side facing up is because we're going to do a double flat stitch. So get your crochet hook and whichever thread color you would be using to attach. So for me, I decided to use the gradient thread. I'm gonna make my slip knot or my cowboy lasso. So once I have my crochet thread onto my hook, it's time for us to begin attaching. So to attach your squares, you need to work with the stitch loop at the back. All right, so you know after creating your stitches, they look like a V. Let me use this one so you can see the shapes proper. Okay, so after making your crochet chains, they all look like this sort of V-shaped, right? They all look like this V shape you're seeing here. Now the back stitch would be the one to the left. So this kind of V or heart shape, as I like to describe it, you're gonna put your hook through the back one, and you will easily know the back loop stitch on that, because when your pattern is laying flat down onto your surface you're working on, the back loop is the one that is resting on your surface. So the back loop will be this one right here, which is the one resting on the surface, right? So once you have identified your back loop, what you want to do, all right, let me fix my crochet thread. What you want to do is take your hook, insert it from the corner, because all your squares should line up because they're all the same length. All right, so you want to start from the corner loop of both squares, and you're gonna take your hook and insert it through that back loop on the right square, and then you're going to insert it through the back loop of the left square. So now you have 3 loops on your crochet hook. Now when you're working with creating the stitch, you want to make sure that your crochet thread is laying behind and between your 2 crochet squares, because it's easier to pull your thread, and it also helps with creating that top flat stitch. So if we've reached the area, we've reached the part where we have the 3 loops onto the hook, and you're going to just hold your crochet thread between the 2 squares behind it there, and you're just going to hook the thread, and you're going to pull it all the way through all 3 loops. Now it's going to be a little tricky for the first 3 loops. All right, there we go. So once you've had that, you're going to go on to the next loops. Again, you're going to hook it from the back loop, and once you get that back loop on the right, you're going to hook it onto the back loop onto the left. Once you have those 3 loops onto your hook, all right, there's my 3 loops, 1, 2, 3. You're going to again hook thread, and you're going to pull it all the way through all 3 loops, and you're going to keep doing that until you reach to the end of the squares. All right, now again, while you're doing this, here's a little tip. While you're doing this, every time you create a stitch, just make sure that your squares are still lining up, and make sure that you are using the loops that are lined up next to each other when you are creating your stitch, because you don't want to go high and low, and what's gonna happen is that when you reach to the top of one, you're gonna realize that the other one is high up like this, and that's because you did not line up your square and stitch with the loops that are next to each other. That is very important, and every time you're working, always make sure that your crochet thread is between your 2 squares behind it. You don't want it to be to the front, because it's gonna end up with some problems. So the thread is gonna have to be behind your 2 pieces and between the squares. So I'm gonna just do this one more time and show you guys. So you want to insert your hook into the back loop. Again, it might be a bit tricky, all right, but just take your time, there's no rush. And then you want to insert it again on the back loop of the left square. You see, there's the problem, my thread was not behind it. There we go. So I'm just going to reinsert my hook into my loop. Now that I have all 3 looped onto my hook, I'm going to hook piece of thread and just pull it all the way through. And you're just going to continue that process again all the way up to the top. So go ahead and do that, and when we get to the top, I'm going to come back and we're going to continue attaching all our pieces. I'm also going to come back and show you what you're going to do when it's time to attach another row onto what you have thus far. Now that I've finished my first row, I'm going to get ready to attach my second row. So this is one of the pieces from the second row. It's going to line up at the end there, then this piece, and then that piece. All right, so basically this is how it's going to run. So I'm just going to attach this going all the way across that way. And I'm going to be using the same method that I used to connect it here. So let me show you. This is how your top flat stitch should look. Right, I hope you can see it properly. Right. And you're going to do the same method to connect the new pieces. And here's a tip: if you have craft clips or you have safety pins, I would recommend you sort of just clip or pin the top of the squares in place, so this way it stays in line. So while you are stitching, nothing moves or shifts out of place to cause you to stitch anything out of line. And you can just work with the thread between. Remember to keep that behind. Now, so I'm gonna go ahead. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5 rows of these to attach. And once I have attached all 5 rows, I'm gonna come back so you can see how we go along attaching them vertically. So right now I'm attaching them horizontally. Once all my horizontal attachments have been done, I'm going to come back and show you guys how to attach vertically, because what's gonna happen when you start to attach vertically, you're gonna meet intersections, and I want to show you how to go over those intersections and still have a nice, neat, clean finish. Alright, so I have reached an intersection and I want to show you how to go over your intersection and make it look nice and flush. So I'm going to do the last loop here of these 2 squares. So I have my 3 loops on my hook. So here's my string. It is behind the squares, as I have always told you guys throughout this video, keep it behind the squares. And because it is under the first crochet stitch that I did right here, all I'm going to do is, I lost my loop. All I'm going to do is hold it right where it is here and pull it through the 3 loops. And as you can see, that chain link is going to go over my horizontal stitch. So let me show you, because I did a few. So here is, let me open it down, there we go. So here is my intersection. Here's the intersection, all right? And as you can see, my chain link went over, my vertical chain link went over my horizontal flat stitch. So my vertical flat stitch went over my horizontal flat stitch. And that was because of how I just went over my intersection. And once I have that loop, I go into the first back chain link of the next squares, and then I go into the next one, and I do my entire process all over again until I reach my next intersection. And once I reach that next intersection, I do the same thing I just did here. And again, because my string, my crochet string, is behind my squares, when I reach my intersection, it's just for me to pull the string over and everything gets connected. Okay, so here is the finished attached piece. These are all of my squares attached vertically and horizontally. And the last thing to do now is just crochet. I'm going to do the same double stitch crochet method, and I'm just going to create a nice straight edge all the way around. And I'm going to create 2 rows around my edges. My first row is going to be with my blue crochet thread, and my second row is going to be with my two-toned crochet thread. All right, now I'm not going to show you guys how I go about just doing that stitch around. It's going to be the same method that I showed you guys to create your double stitch crochet squares. And instead of going back and forth to create rows, all you're doing is going along the edge and creating one long chain along the edge of your piece. All right, so in my next video, I'm going to show you guys how to take your, basically it's a crocheted piece of fabric. I'm going to show you guys how you can take it and create a pretty stylish crossbody bag out of this. It's going to be fun, fun, fun. So for that project, I want you guys to get your hands on any piece of scrap fabric that is the same, that is going to be the same size as your crocheted piece, right? And also get your hands on some glue, because we'll be sticking that fabric to create a nice inner lining for the bag. So guys, until next time, deuces.